This little cartoon that's in your book is really quite cute because it really does define the difference between Freudians and behaviorists. The Freudian is always going to be looking for the nature of the trouble and when it began, assuming in the past. And the behaviorist is all about behavior change, and really, let's drive it around and see what happens, is really the baseline for most behavior therapy. Actually, it's a key when we're talking about behavior therapy, because we don't know what we want to change until we see how it actually is. And so one of the key characteristics or kind of important concepts in behavior therapy is baselines. In other words, I need to know what's happening right now before I can figure out what I want to change. And so they are the ultimate researchers in terms of changing behavior. Ultimate experimenters would be another word that you might want to put into it. The behaviorists are essentially using all of the behavioral techniques to help change human behavior. And so the behavior therapists question the therapeutic power of self-awareness. They're saying essentially that self-awareness, as I indicated earlier, is not sufficient to change behavior. So the question is, in their minds, is what's the reinforcement, what are the reinforcement schedules, what is the aversive things in the environment that are either reinforcing behavior or extinguishing behavior that we need to actually look at. So they assume problem behaviors are the problems and don't look any farther for inner causes. Instead, they're applying learning principles to change behavior. And in this particular context, there are certain psych disorders, like we talked about earlier, that respond really quite well to behavioral therapy. One good example is counter conditioning. It is essentially a technique, a behavioral technique that is based on classical conditioning and essentially conditions new responses to stimuli that trigger unwanted behavior. And so in this category might fall exposure therapies. A good example of exposure therapies would be something we refer to as systematic desensitization. And I have a video. I'm not sure I'm going to be able to put it on here, but in terms of overcoming a phobia of snakes. It's a young woman who was participating in a grad program, and she underwent one of these treatment models, and they videotaped her progress, and it worked famously to overcome the fear that she had regarding snakes. Systematic desensitization for the longest time has been the treatment of choice when it comes to phobias. And usually it has been very long. It takes a number of weeks to be able to make some headway. And what this particular researcher found was you could strip away all the components related to relaxation, which is part of systematic desensitization, and just go to the exposure in a safe environment. And what happens is you see the person overcoming it. Another one, which is becoming more and more popular, partly because of the power of the power of our computers, is virtual reality exposure therapy. So, in a lot of cases, we don't even have to expose the person to the feared stimuli. Exposure therapy. We can introduce them to it in a virtual reality sense and essentially decondition or counter-condition them for whatever the particular stimuli is. Another one is aversive conditioning, and essentially the classic example of this particular kind of conditioning is something that we used to use, and I think we still even do today in substance abuse, is the use of the drug Antabuse. And Antabuse is a kind of drug that if somebody is a chronic alcoholic, and let's say they got into a driving violation for driving while intoxicated, and they were put on Antabuse, what that means is that if they fell off the wagon, as the old phrase used to be, if they relapsed, they would, because they were taking Antabuse, they would get violently ill to drinking alcohol with that drug in their system, and that would be aversive conditioning. Essentially, it's trying to make a different connection between the addictive substance, if you want to put it that way, a connection between aversive stimuli, which would be the illness, and the substance, which was the thing that was getting the person with substance, which was getting the person into trouble. Essentially, the thing that's interesting about this is ages and ages old. It used to be in Roman times that they would put a snake in somebody's wine in order to decondition or aversively condition them away from drinking alcohol, essentially. So that's a good example of that. Some other places that we find this is certainly in the school system. We refer to this as behavior modification. In behavior mod is the shortened version of it. And behavior modification includes token economies. If you're familiar with the STARS economy, the stars and collecting stars and then trading them in for gifts or rewards or things like that. That's all part of behavior modification, and it has had a huge impact, particularly working with emotionally disordered kids, which I've mentioned to you. My wife teaches, and she uses a token economy. They gain privileges with consistency change in their behavior, and that's part of the landscape. But this is one of these applications, if you will, of behavior therapy within the school system, and behavior modification techniques have been around for 50, 60 years and have been very useful, certainly effective in changing the landscape of kids' behavior, particularly problem behavior in the classroom.
When was the last time you were in an elevator?
It's almost as bad as the tunnel.
Well, I think, Bill, the time has come.
This session becomes challenge night.
My challenge is tomorrow, Bill attempts to do the elevator routine with those of us who are available there to cheer him on and support him. Are you willing to give it a shot?
I'm game for anything.
Okay.
How you feeling?
A little better today. Last night I had a little rough time.
Did you think about this last night?
Yes, I certainly did. I didn't sleep at all.
Now, when was the last time you were in an elevator? Tell me in years. Do you know?
I'll say 8. How's that?
8 years?
Yeah, I'll say 6 to 8 years.
Now listen to me. You have your survival pack.
Right.
If you start to feel that your throat is closing, you have your lemonade. You know what to do with the brown paper bag.
Correct.
Okay?
Correct.
You have your prayers you can say?
Oh, I had them memorized.
Okay.
When you walk into that elevator, and that door closes, what will Bill be thinking about?
The first thing is going to hit me that I'm not coming back out. I'm going to get stuck in there and I'm going to die on the floor. Okay, thank you.
Good luck, Bill. Come on, Bill.
I'm going to try to put it out of my mind.
Go get him.
Thanks again. I'll need all your support.
You got it, Bill. We're with you.
Okay, thank you.
Come on, 3.
Thank God.
Okay.
Still divine made it as far as this far. That's
How
the
do you
main
feel?
thing.
You're shaking.
Okay, that's all right.
You're shaking.
I know.
Have some of your lemonade. You'll
Okay.
feel better.
That's all
You're
right.
trembling.
That's all right. I took an Ativan. They're supposed to slow it down.
So what was it like, Bill?
It was a lot easier than what I thought, really. I anticipated. made it more than really what it was.
All right, that took about 25 seconds, that ride.
Really?
Yep.
Seemed a little longer than that
It
to me.
seemed longer than 25 seconds?
Yeah, excuse me. And it's no gin in here or vodka, by the way. Okay, I just want to let you know.
Next week, we'll start working on hitting all the elevators on Staten Island. Okay?
I made it!
The good part about it is we know how to treat the disorders and how to control them so that people do not have to suffer.